Did you know that there are so many facts about podcasting that are rarely shared or told to you? And knowing these facts are critical for succeeding with podcasting. Want to know what these are? Then this video is for you. Hello and welcome to TPU TV. This is Dilip. If you don't know me and you're new here, then I'm a blogger, podcaster, and affiliate marketer. And this is a channel where I share a lot of simple, practical, and implementable podcasting tips. And if you're new to podcasting and want to get started with your own podcast, then you might want to join my free 10-day course on how to start a podcast. You'll be able to find the link in the description box below. Go ahead, click the link and join the course and get started with your own podcast in less than 10 days. Now, on to today's topic. The go-to resource for most of us, especially when it comes to learning things like podcasting, blogging, vlogging, or whatever it is the internet. A lot of us who don't really prefer paying for a course or who can't afford paying for a course prefer using a lot of these free blogs, podcasts, and websites that are available out there to learn some of these skills. It is indeed a good way of learning, though one major downside to it is to find what is relevant, aggregate it, and then learn from it. But there is another big drawback that we don't realize, and that is that most of these blog posts, videos, podcasts, and articles show only one aspect of it, which is the brighter side, and only very few or very rarely do they show you the not so brighter side of content creation, blogging, podcasting, vlogging, etc. And when it comes to podcasting specifically, the way it is portrayed is that it is as simple as picking a microphone, recording an audio and putting out there and getting 1 million downloads and becoming the next famous name on the internet. But it is far from what the truth is. In this video, I will share with you 10 such facts about podcasting that you rarely hear anybody talking about. And these 10 facts are going to be extremely critical for the success of your show. So let's get started. Now, before we start, these 10 facts that I'm going to share today are things that every podcaster faces at some point in their journey and should need to know. Now, showing the brighter side and saying that everything is hunky-dory and everything is very simple and you can straight away get started is a good way of pushing a lot of those people who are sitting on the fence or maybe are a little lazy to get started. So it's a good way to do that. And as human beings, we are programmed to avoid anything that doesn't sound very comfortable to us. Maybe that is why a lot of these bloggers or vloggers or podcasters or a lot of these articles don't talk about these uncomfortable things. But the reason I am doing this today, the reason I am sharing these things with you today is to ensure that you know what you're getting into even before you're getting started. And that is if you haven't started your podcast yet. And this will help you make an informed decision and get started with your podcast, which in turn will ensure that you're enjoying the process of content creation. And if you already have a podcast, and it is unlikely that you haven't faced one of the things that I'm going to talk about. So if that is the case, then I'm hoping to make you understand or make you aware that these are things that pretty much every podcaster faces. And success is basically in getting over this, managing these problems and getting over it. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to put across those points to you if you're already into podcasting. Now, with that out of the way, let us get started. Number one, podcasting is not as easy as it is made to look. Now, nothing in this world is easy. Everything is difficult. If there is something that is being shown as easy, then it is unreal. Now, podcasting too has its own difficulties. You need to slog it out and compete with a bunch of other competitors in your niche to make a name for yourself. Unless you are a celebrity or maybe a brand name who already has a following, you have to go through that process. And podcasting also involves learning a lot of new things that you might not be comfortable with. Like, for example, technical things about audio, marketing, promotions, socializing, etc. These are just some of the things that you might want to learn. And I hear a lot of people saying that I'm not a social media person. So if you feel that you're not a social media person, then you have to become a social media person to promote your podcast. If you think you're technically challenged, then be ready to put in that extra effort to learn a lot of technical things if you want to succeed in podcasting. And be ready to work long hours and still be disappointed looking at those download numbers just because they are maybe in single digits. Be ready for a rocky ride. Once you accept the fact that it is not going to be an easy ride, that podcasting is not easy and it is going to be a rocky ride, the entire journey becomes much easier for you. You'll be prepared for what is in store and it will become much easier for you. Number 2, a good microphone is the minimum equipment that you will need to start. Now, if somebody told you that you can get started by using your computer's microphone or maybe your mobile phone's microphone, then let me tell you, they were lying. And if they told you that you can pick up any cheap microphone, then too they were lying, because podcasting is all about good audio. You don't need excellent audio, but you need good audio. A good audio is a must. And for good audio, you need good quality microphone and not just any cheap microphones. Hence, I would recommend picking up a good quality microphone and consider it as an investment into your podcasting business. The reason I'm calling it a business is because in the long term, podcasting is going to help you make money. And when you're getting into something that is going to help you make money or make a living, then anything that you're going to put into it, any money that you're going to put into it is going to be an investment. So invest in a good quality microphone. Now, if you're confused and don't know what is a good quality microphone, then I've put together a blog post on some of the affordable and good quality microphones. You'll be able to find a link in the description box below. Go ahead and check it out and you'll be able to find some good microphone that you can afford. Number 3, sponsorships are a rare commodity and doesn't come to ordinary podcasters. Now, every other podcaster out there starts off with an eventual goal of making money, of monetizing their show. Ask them how they're going to do it and they'll tell you that they're going to build a huge listenership and then get sponsors for their show. Something that you want to be absolutely clear about is that sponsorships don't come to ordinary podcasters who might maybe getting about 1,000 to 2,000 downloads per episode. These are the normal numbers that any podcaster would get, unlike a lot of those celebrity podcasters who get maybe millions of downloads. Sponsors look for high profile podcasters who have huge download numbers because they need to have a good ROI on the money that they are spending. And while it is not impossible to build a huge audience, it is difficult and it's going to take a lot of time. So if you're okay to wait for maybe a couple of years before you even start monetizing your podcast, then absolutely wait for sponsors. Otherwise, I would recommend that instead of targeting sponsorships, try using other monetization methods like affiliate marketing or subscriptions, digital products, or even merchandising. Number 4, podcasts very rarely make money by itself. You need to use it as a medium to make money. Podcasts aren't a source of making money, except for maybe a few of the top podcasters who are maybe paid to run their podcast. Very rarely do podcasters make money from their podcast as a source of income. You can look at any successful podcaster out there, be it Pat Flynn, John Lee Dumas, Amy Porterfield. They all make money using other sources, like for example, affiliate marketing, digital courses that they own, their speaking gigs, their consultations. So these are some of the sources that they use, and they use their podcast as a medium to get customers for these sources. So a decision that you need to make is that, do you want to wait till eternity to earn money from your podcast as a source, or do you want to start making money using your podcast as a medium? Once that decision is made, you can get started making money without having to wait for 1 million downloads. Number 5, 2 non-negotiables in podcasting is a website and email marketing. Now, whenever podcasting is spoken about, it is spoken in silo. But the truth is that unlike blogging or maybe YouTube vlogging, podcasting cannot work in silo. You can blame it on the nature of the medium. You need a support in the form of a website if you want to make use of your podcast, if you want to make money from your podcast, or maybe build a brand for yourself. And if you are even the slightest serious about building a listenership for your podcast, then you will need to build a list of your listeners to whom you can market to and to whom you can send emails and bring them back as repeat listeners for your podcast. So 2 things that are non-negotiables in podcasting is having a website and 2, having an email list and doing email marketing. So don't compromise on these. Number 6, don't expect to make money from your podcast if you're planning to run it for free. Most online courses and video podcasts talk about starting a podcast for free because Podcast hosting is free. There are free editing softwares out there. You can promote your podcast for free. Now, the truth is that if you're planning on running your podcast on freebies, then you shouldn't expect to make money from your podcast. Free creates a mindset of free, and you will never be able to get into that money-making mindset which is required if you want to make money from your podcast. Moreover, free will never give you all of those options and resources that you will need to make money from your podcast. So if you're serious about making money from your podcast, then look for good quality resources that are premium. That doesn't mean that you need to pay for anything and everything that you might not even need in your podcasting journey. Invest in the things that you absolutely need, that are very important and that can have an impact on the growth of your podcast. Like, for example, a good podcast hosting company, a good microphone, invest some money into some of the promotion techniques. So these are some things that you need to spend some money. Consider it as an investment to build your podcast, to grow your podcast listeners, and then eventually make money from them. Number 7, social media is just one of the promotional methods and probably the least effective. Now, this can be extremely controversial because a lot of the people or a lot of the podcast tutorials out there talk about using social media as the core or the primary promotional strategy when it comes to podcast promotions. And I've spoken to a lot of new podcasters who get started with their podcast. And when I ask them how is it that they're planning to grow their podcast, their single answer is social media. But the hard truth is that social media is probably the least effective of all podcast promotion methods or podcast discovery. So I would recommend you to consider it as just one of the methods and understand that it is the least effective. Why? Because social media is not a discovery source. People are on social media to either interact with their family members, their friends, their acquaintances, or maybe to while away their time, to spend some time watching some of those 60-second reels, scrolling on their phones, and watching some of those funny reels out there. Now, the possibility of somebody becoming a serious and a permanent listener of your podcast when they are doing any of these things is very remote and very less. So what exactly does social media do? Social media brings back your listeners by staying in touch with them, by talking to them on a regular basis. And this will ensure that they become repeat listeners for your podcast. But if you're looking to build listenership, then you might want to use some of the other discovery methods that I've already spoken in one of my previous video. I'll link to that in the I button here. So check out those discovery methods like, for example, word of mouth, search engine optimization, podcast directories, etc. These are things that will help you build an audience for your podcast. So use one of them to build listeners for your podcast. Number 8, the first thing to do when you're starting your podcast is not identifying your niche. One of the things that I hear most people talking about when starting a podcast is to start off with identifying your niche. While that is a critical part of any content creation business, it really isn't the first thing to do. Instead, the first step is to identify your purpose or your reason for why you're planning to start a podcast. Your purpose or your reason is what will guide you throughout the journey, throughout the tough journey of podcasting. It is what will keep you focused and help you stay consistent with whatever it is that you're doing. It will act as your North Star when you need that much required motivation that will push you to keep going. So ensure that you have a purpose or you have identified the real reason or the purpose of starting a podcast. So before you get started, you might want to ask yourself some of the questions like, why am I doing this? What am I planning to achieve by starting this podcast? What are my prospective listeners going to gain from listening to this podcast? These are some of the questions that you should ask yourself and which will help you find a purpose for getting started. So ensure that you find the reason for getting started even before you identify your niche. Number 9, audio editing is a very simple art that you can easily learn and that you should absolutely learn. One of the things that most beginner podcasters are found struggling with is audio editing. In fact, there's a lot of those people who do not even start their podcast just because they think that audio editing is going to be extremely difficult and that they'll never be able to do it. And with all of those jargons and the videos out there which show you a lot of these very typically technical stuff, it is normal for people to get overwhelmed with audio editing. But the truth is that audio editing is a very simple art and you can easily learn it. And it is also true that it is an art that you don't have to master, especially if you're planning to run your podcast. You just need to know the minimum amount of things that you need to make your audio listenable or audio good quality. You can ignore all of the other jargons that you hear and dump them for good, and just do these 4 things that I recommend when it comes to podcast editing. The first one is the background noise removal, which is a very simple activity. I've already created a video on how to use Audacity to remove background noise. You can go and watch that if you don't know how to do that. Number 2 is cutting, joining and mixing, which is another important activity in podcasting. You might want to mix your intro, outro and some music, cut pieces which are irrelevant or maybe where there are mistakes, and join different audio clips. So these are some things that you might want to learn. The third thing is normalization, which is again a very simple process. I've created a video about 5 weeks back. You can go ahead and check that out. I link to it in the description below and in the I button here. You can go and watch that. And the fourth and the last thing is exporting your video as an MP3 file. This is all that you will need when it comes to audio editing. Learn these and you're good to get started with your podcast. And number 10 and the last one. You can never learn everything before you start. Learn as you do it. But this is not just in podcasting, it is true with every form of content creation. If you thought that you can learn everything and then start, then that is never going to happen, because there are so many things to learn and it is going to take ages for you to learn everything. Nobody has ever learned everything before they got started. In fact, what most successful people did is they got started and then they learned as it came. They learned by doing it. So I would recommend gathering the minimum required information and getting started with your podcast. Then keep learning as you do it. Stay there, be consistent and keep learning. That's the way to go with podcasting. So those were the 10 facts about podcasting that nobody tells you. The reason why I shared these with you is just so that you make an informed decision if podcasting is something for you, and so that you enjoy the process instead of getting overwhelmed and overburdened and eventually quit podcasting. And also, I'm hoping that this will help you know what podcasting entails and that it will help you make the right decision and succeed with your podcast. If you have any questions, you can drop them in the comment box below and I'll respond to all of that. If you enjoyed this video, then don't forget to click the thumbs up button below, because that will help others also find this information and benefit from it. And if you're new to this channel, then you might want to subscribe to this channel and hit the bell notification so that you stay updated with all of the latest videos that I release. This is all that I have for this week. I'll be back again next week with another interesting discussion around podcasting. Until then, keep watching TPU TV. This is goodbye from Dilip. You all have a wonderful rest of the week.